Welcome to The Current by TreasureCoast.com, where we discuss interesting people, places, and happenings on Florida's Treasure Coast.
So again, thanks so much for joining us. I guess it is probably a good starting point if you want to talk about what what your role is, maybe even what an average day looks like for the mayor.
So, just so everyone knows, our form of government is a council manager form of government. And what that means is that there is a 5-member city council. And we are all elected at large by all of the citizens of Port St. Lucie. And we are the legislative component. We are the policy makers. And we have a city manager who is in charge of all the city departments, and he runs the day-to-day operations of all the different departments. So on any given day, I am in the office quite often. On any given day, I'm reviewing documents, I'm meeting with city staff on projects, on updates, on things coming up, meeting with the city manager, meeting with the city attorney. I do go out of the office for meetings. I sit on several other boards. I'm on the St. Lucie County Transportation Planning Organization. I'm on the St. Lucie County Fire District Board. I've actually been in office on the city council since 2010 and was elected mayor in 21 and 22. I sign documents, I review memos, you name it, anything having to do with anything city, I handle it on a daily basis. Talking to residents, emailing back and forth with residents, talking to them on the phone, going out to groups regularly, HOAs, other nonprofits, other groups to talk about what's going on in the city. Obviously, I get invited to many of those types of events, no matter what the group is. Mm-hmm. Most recently, I was at the PSL Newcomers Group, and I love doing that because I love sharing as much information that is factual and accurate as I possibly can. Because as you can imagine, in a city of our size, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I like to make sure I'm addressing all of that.
Right. And I think that's an interesting topic or an interesting point of conversation at how things have changed probably since 2010 to now. I mean, obviously the city, Port St. Lucie, is exponentially different in the last 15 years. But also from a governing standpoint, how has that changed and how has it affected what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Well, it's definitely been a lot more challenging. With growth comes a lot of challenges in dealing with road infrastructure and making sure that we have enough parks, making sure we're constructing the parks, and most importantly, making sure that we are making the necessary changes to be able to serve our residents at the highest level possible, and making sure that all of our decisions are data-driven and they're based on what our citizens have told us that they want. Public engagement is a top priority for me, for the rest of the council, for our city administration, because we're supposed to be building a future based on our residents, not on anything else. So that is a top priority. That is very, very, very important. And that's what we make sure that we do every day through our strategic plan that we have in place. It has 7 goals in it as far as how we want the city to be in the future, as far as our visioning and what our mission is. And so we make sure that all of those projects and all the things that are in the strategic plan are worked on a daily basis.
Right. Yeah. So are there things, I mean, you mentioned things like infrastructure. Obviously that is always top of mind with the growth of Port St. Lucie, parks. Is there anything that you feel that the city's done a really good job on and maybe hasn't done a good job on other things? Or I guess, are there things that you feel you focus more on the improvement of? Because one of the things that I think a lot of people have talked about is the parks, because things like Pioneer Park's a good example. I mean, people really go from all over the place to experience it. I think that's major for the city. And even things like when they redid the South Bend Jessica Clinton Park, yes. A lot of those, I think a lot of people, that was really positive for a lot of people. So I'm interested to hear your take on that. things that you feel maybe need more work or more attention, or that have been successes?
Sure. So Port St. Lucie, we pride ourselves on being a safe, clean, and beautiful city for all people. We are, when it comes to our parks, you're absolutely right. We have a 10-year Parks and Rec master plan that is actively worked on every single day. We have parks that need refurbishment. They're on a cycle. We make sure that they get refurbished and reinvigorated and changed out when necessary. Pioneer Park is a shining example of great collaboration in making sure that we are delivering a world-class park to our residents. And how that came about is when we were in the planning stages for that, parks is something that I champion. The things I champion the most are public safety, parks, and public works, because that has to do with infrastructure, and that's very important. It all ties to
Mhm.
public safety. It all ties to a great
Right.
quality of life. So when we envisioned Pioneer Park, I did
Right.
some traveling with the Parks and Rec team to different parks in the state and also around the country to see how we can bring a world-class facility back to Port St. Lucie. And we created that vision based on those site visits and that collaboration together. And that's how we ultimately came up with the design of Pioneer Park. And as you mentioned, it is an amazing park. Everyone loves it. And that's exactly what we want to
Mhm.
make sure that we're delivering to our residents every single time. And some of the challenges that we have, I would say, is that when you're operating a city of our size, we're the sixth largest in the state of Florida. We're 121 square miles. We're the third largest in terms of land mass. You can imagine the challenges when you have 49,000 people move to a city in a 4-year time period, right? So it's being able to keep up with
Right.
the growth,
Right.
manage all of that growth as best as possible. And then the things I wish we could do differently is we could have more streamlined approach in getting certain projects done, especially as it relates to working with our state and other grant opportunities that we have. Because what happens is that when you have to go through that process, and the reason why we leverage our resources and we get state funding is because some of these projects are astronomical in cost, and we need state funding and we need state help.
Mhm.
But those are the ones that seem to take the longest, and we don't have a lot of control over that. And I wish we could have more control over it, but that's what happens when you have to work with other agencies and get those resources. You're pretty much reliant on their timeline, even though there are things in place in the contract um, to mitigate for that. You still have to wait on their timeline. So that's the challenge. That's what makes it more difficult when we have to get these projects done, but we know that we're not totally in control of them.
Right. I see what you mean. And so those is that for most projects that go on? Like, for if there's road improvements done, is that typically going to have federal involvement, or do you always know when you're going to need it, or is it kind of you start bidding it out and then you start to realize, okay, this is going to cost more than we think, and there's, federal grants are needed, or how does that usually work?
Yeah, so we have a 2050 long range transportation plan, and we have a board called the St. Lucie County Transportation Planning Organization. 4 members of the city council sit on it, 4 members of the county commission, 2 members of Fort Pierce commission, and one community transit representative. And our staff basically talks to us here about what projects we know that we can do, either from general fund dollars, road and bridge fund. Our half-cent sales tax is already planned out because that's what we went to the voters for. We put
Mhm.
specific projects, but
Right.
we figure out early on what we're going to need help with and how we have to get those projects into the process, because the state process is a long process. So we do know that sometimes things do come up where there's opportunity for federalizing. And then if, like, Crosstown Parkway, for example, the extension that ended up being a federalized
Right.
project when we knew that we needed more funding. So we worked through that process. But most of the time we know going in, which way we're going to go in terms of how we're going to get the funding. Now, you bring up a great point about estimating dollars, right? Because you can get an estimate of a cost today in today's money, but that doesn't mean when you're ready to do the project that that cost is going to be the same. So there's always that challenge too.
Right, right.
And that's something that we have to work on a regular basis and address as well.
Yeah, it's funny talking about infrastructure. I was talking to my cousin yesterday morning about Becker Road when it was a dirt road.
Yes.
I mean that couldn't have been more than, I mean, it must have been like the early 2000s. It wasn't that long ago. But the amount of infrastructure improvements, it's I know you have a plan. How does that plan take shape, and does it depend on, if there's like a new development, what is it now, Solaris, where Oak Ridge Ranch is?
Mhm.
Is there like a development and then you say, okay, well, we have to pick up infrastructure here, traditions blowing up, we'll start to focus more on infrastructure there? Or is it kind of more of a sticky plan, since sometimes the time frame can take longer? How does that always work?
So that's kind of broken up into a couple parts. So if there is a developer, let's take tradition, for example. So we have the entire Southwest annexation area from Crosstown Parkway down to Becker Road, which is west of 95. All of that land was annexed
Mhm.
into the city back in the early 2000s. When those developers wanted to annex into the city, in the annexation agreements, they had to agree to put in infrastructure. Now, that infrastructure is phased in over a long period of time for what's called a development of regional impact that came after the annexation agreement and the development orders. So, for example, you see Becker Road now is done out to Range Line Road. That was the responsibility of the three
Right.
developers that are existing. So that was always in the plan, and that was their obligation. Is just a matter of at what time frame that road needed to get done and what the agreement was and what was
Got it. Okay.
stipulated. Now, other roads, like for example, Floresta, right? Floresta Phase 3, we just broke ground on Floresta Phase 3 this week.
Mhm.
And so that has been a road that's been in process through our half-cent sales tax project. So we knew when we went out to
Right.
the voters, we had a list of projects and said, hey, these are the projects we want to get done. We can do that with sales tax money if you approve it. Our residents said yes. So now we've continued on that path. Port St. Lucie Boulevard South is an example of that state project that I talked about earlier, about how we partnered with the state. The state disperses funds. We go through their process, and then we use state money, and then that ends up being under the control of them. So it just depends on
Okay.
what where the location is. But then, of course, we know that we need improvements. So take St. Lucie West Boulevard. We know from the traffic that we need to address that road. We went out for a estimate to see what it would cost to fully widen that road and make all the necessary improvements. Well, that estimate came back about $71 million. Well, we don't have $71 million lying around,
Pocket change, right?
right?
Yeah.
So we embarked on two things.
Yeah, yeah.
We're going to put it in the state program so that we can get funds for it and go through the process. But in the meantime, what can we do from a design standpoint that will be less costly, that we can afford to improve mobility and improve that flow of traffic? And so what we decided to do there was
Right.
we have turn lanes on both sides in certain sections. And so we looked at, okay, well, if we extend the turn lanes into all the business shopping plazas and everything, will that be less costly, and what does that look like? So we gave direction, the city council gave direction to city staff to go on that route and bring us back that design and that cost of extending the turn lanes, which will improve mobility. We have so many projects. We have where there's four-way stops. If you take Savona and Parr, or Parr and Darwin for two examples, the four-way stops are causing a lot of backups to get to 95 on Becker Road. So we are going to be putting in roundabouts. So we're always looking at throughout the entire city how we can improve mobility. What can we do for infrastructure projects to do just that? And like I said, we have so many plans in the hopper and process. It's just a matter of design. Do we need some right of way in order to make it happen? And then, of course, going to construction. And we also have to follow processes in order for that, because if anytime you want to go out to bid, there is what's called a request for a proposal process, and the state laws are very strict in terms of how we have to go about that process. So that also is a reason why sometimes things take longer than we expect, because or we want to, because we have to follow state law and go through those processes.
Right. Right. You're kind of going through the hurdles that need to be
Yes,
going through.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because I think a lot of Treasure Coast cities are going through similar. I mean, Port St. Lucie is going through growth that I think
Yes.
it's hard to really compare to most cities in the state. But I do think there are a lot of cities in the Treasure Coast that are kind of at this point of where there are people who are really excited about the growth. There are people who are pushing back against the growth. And I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on that, whether it's your own stance on the growth or thoughts on how you're going to continue managing it. Anything that you have that you think would be insightful in that regard?
Yeah, so I want to share a little bit about again how our city was planned, so people have a better understanding of it. So we were planned originally as a
Right. Yeah, that's a good
pre-platted
idea.
community, right? We were a pre-platted community when we were founded in 1961 by General Development Corporation, and we were 80,000 single family lots. When our community was planned and founded that way and platted that way, that gave the inherent right for anyone, entity, or individual who owns a quarter-acre lot or a residential lot to build a single family home without any interference of government stopping that. As long as they put in their construction plans, follow the Florida Building Code, and get their CO. We cannot stop anyone
Mm-hmm.
from building a single family home on a single family lot. Then 30 years ago, or about 30 years ago, St. Lucie West was annexed into the city. And when St. Lucie West was annexed in, those developers were given entitlements and development rights. And as you can see, and as we all know, St. Lucie West is pretty much fully done, right? There's only a couple commercial spots that are left. So
Yeah.
those rights were granted. Then again, going back to the tradition area or Southwest annexation area, when those were annexed in, that land was annexed into the city. Those developers were granted entitlements and rights to develop for residential, mixed, commercial, some light industrial, office, and all that square footage and entitlements was granted. And so, as a result of all of that, and those entitlements and development rights that were granted, I can't change that. The city council can't change that. No one can change that, because those were the agreements that were made at the time. So I understand that people are upset and frustrated over the growth and how fast it's happened, which we could have never predicted. I mean, ever since COVID, it's been 11,000 people a year for 3 years, and then just last year from 2023 to 2024, we saw over 14,000 people move to the city of Port St. Lucie. So we cannot change
Right.
that, and we can't stop that. The only way you can stop that is, and I can assure you, I have researched this. My background was a paralegal prior to being on the city council. I have researched this and discussed this with many city attorneys and legal experts. The only way to put moratoriums or stop that is if you don't have at least the basic infrastructure, or you don't have water and sewer, and you don't have the basic services in order to serve those areas. We do here in Port St. Lucie. And then the state law is very specific that if you do want to do something that affects a property owner, because property rights law in Florida is very strict, and it's also, we're a state that
Mm-hmm.
favors property rights. You have to make improvements in a very
Right.
short amount of time as not to hinder the rights of those property owners, whether it be an individual or an entity. And so, going back to the fact that roads take years to design and construct, and of course you have to have the funding, there is no way we would be able to get certain things done in a time period which would not inhibit or hinder a property owner's right to develop, especially if they already have those rights granted. So I understand the frustration. We are managing it. I get frustrated. I mean, if you think about it, this city government organization, everybody is working 24/7, 100 miles an hour trying to get things done because of all the development and all the things that are happening, all the projects that we have to get done, all the parks that we have to build. And we are doing all of that. I would love to be able to take a pause and stop things for a little while, just so that we all could take, not just residents, but our city, uh, employees, everyone could just have a rest and take a little pause and take a breather. But unfortunately, that's not
Right.
what's happening. Now, what we can do and what we are doing as a city council is we are looking at areas where those entitlements weren't granted. And when those plans and those projects come forward and through our planning and zoning process, we are taking a hard look at those and saying, hey, does this really fit our city? Do we need more residential here? Do we need this development?
Right.
That's where we're be able to make change and progress. And the other thing is, we understand that conservation is important, conservation land is important, that our citizens want us to be able to try to save land and keep it and not develop it. So we have city property that we own that are lots, and we've put a pause and said, nope, we're not putting those on the market. We're going to keep those for future opportunities for pocket parks or other parks, or just conservation land straight out that the public may be able to access. And we're also looking at potential land acquisition. We just had um, a, a group come to us, and they own land out on the west side off Rosser, and they said that they wanted to put housing there. And they didn't come to city council yet, but they did meet with me. I can't speak for the rest of the council. I can speak for myself. And I know that planning and zoning turned them down. And when I looked at the project, I said, no, our residents don't want more residential here. We don't need it. But hey, this might be a great opportunity for the city to buy that land and keep it for a future park site. And so I went out with our city manager just last week. We took a look at it, and we are going through the motions now of seeing what it would take, and if we could bring it forward to council, and if the council be willing to purchase it and hold on to it for future park space or future conservation land, because it is zoned that way. And so we can just save it for the future benefit of our residents. Sorry, that was a long-winded.
That's a really no, that's cool. And I think that brings us to a really cool point, because I guess it would be interesting to hear what else you think is exciting for things like that are going to improve quality of life or livability, or because I know what you mean, and I've heard that before, where a lot of these deals were kind of ironed in, whether it's tradition or a lot of that area off Becker, or a lot of it was kind of baked into the cake a long time ago.
Sure.
What is there anything on the horizon that, big or small, that you're personally excited about?
Sure. We broke ground on Tradition Regional Park last summer. That is underway now. What I love about
Oh,
that
right.
opportunity is that we want to make sure that we are putting in the amenities that our residents want, right? So we're always surveying. We have our Citizen Summit. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we addressed, and something that was really important, was the skating element, skate parks, because we had one a long time ago, which one we just opened as a outdoor roller skating or rollerblading facility at Old Skate City, and so excited about being able to bring that back to life, because it was really organically resident driven, and that's what makes it so wonderful. But Tradition Regional Park is out of the ground. We are
Right.
putting in an adaptive all-wheel skate park and BMX park that is the first of its kind, not only in the United States but in the world. And so if you have roller skates or a BMX bike or anything on wheels, we'll be able to utilize that park and be able to enjoy it. And no one else is going to have anything like that. We are in the final design stages for Torino Regional Park, and we're going to break ground on that park in December. There will be a skate park in that park with the bowls and all the different things that the skateboarders require. That will also be for all wheels, but even more so geared toward our skateboarding community. And what was great about that is that we brought the skateboarding community in to get their take and their input on what they want to see for design. And what those elements are that are important to them. I'm not a skateboarder, so I'm not really schooled on it, but we heard from them what they wanted, and we're including those elements into it.
Right.
We have a 10-year Parks and Rec master plan that is getting reworked right now, and it's going to be updated. So parks are important, and our goal here is to get all of our citizens within 10 minutes of a park, because it really does improve the quality of life. And when you see parks come up out of the ground, you do see those neighborhoods selling. And it's because of that value and that quality of life
Right.
in our community. Infrastructure is going to continue to be something that we're going to work on. Like I said, we have a plan that goes out to 2050, leveraging all those resources. We're going to continue on that path. Traffic also has been an issue. So with our new police chief, it's one of the things that was discussed, and he has embarked on, more traffic enforcement, getting the officers out there on our main roads and really cracking down, because that's something our residents said that they were upset about. So it's always about listening to our residents and making sure that we're addressing as best we possibly can all of their needs and their wants. It's a little tricky because human behavior is something we can't regulate, right? If you're going to speed, or you're going to, go not obey the traffic laws, it's very hard when you have 250,000 residents, and there's no way we can hire enough police officers to be out there every single day, tracking and or watching everybody. But it's something that we're going to be responsive to, since our residents have said that this is a problem. So again, anything resident driven, data,
Right.
we're going to continue to address it.
And from a safety perspective, it seems, at least from the outside perspective, that it's been doing better. The city's been doing better from a safety perspective as the growth has gone on. Or is that not true? Or what steps are you taking that you feel are most important from a public safety standpoint?
Yeah, so I appreciate you asking me that, because we are the safest city in the state of Florida for cities with a population of over 100,000. We have been that way for the last 13 years. And that is the mandate to our police department, is to make sure that we continue being that way. We are number 2 in the nation in terms of safety, as reported by U.S. News and World Report. So public safety is always top priority, will continue to be. Our police department uses a method called a stratified policing model, where they analyze through the crime data how they address crime. They have what they call StarCom, where they have accountability sessions on what's going on in the community, and looking at how they address it, and then what steps they can do to make it better. I know that the chief has brought in the original people who created that model, and he's looking to tweak the model to better fit the needs of today. And also, it's not just about the PD, it's also about the involvement that the PD has in our community. We are very blessed here in Port St. Lucie. Our community trusts our police department, and our police department trusts our community. And that collaboration, working together, is of the utmost importance in how we can get things done. So we will continue to make sure and do everything we can to keep us the safest we possibly can. Now, you're always going to see crime trends change a little bit when you have more people moving in. That's normal. But I can tell you that since we are so data driven, and for example, in the social media world, we now see a lot of people posting about all the traffic accidents, right? And it seems like there's just so much more than there used to be. Well, so I said, well, is this really the case, or is it just that we're seeing a lot more being put out on social media? So I asked for the data on traffic crashes from 2023 to 2024. And even though we had 14,000 more people move here in that time period, our traffic crashes overall only went up by 3. So that's pretty good.
3 crashes total?
3 crashes total. So in 2023, it was 5,671. 2024, it was 5,674. So 3 more in a time period of a year, with 14,000 more people moving here. So also fatalities, I wanted to see what that looked like. Well, 2023, it was 10. 2024, 10 fatalities. So our fatalities from traffic crashes has not gone up either. So it's important to have that data to be able to explain that to our residents as well, because the perception, that phrase perception is always reality. Well, in some cases it's not. And that's an example of how it's not, because the data shows otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, especially in this day and age where social media can sometimes exacerbate,
Yes.
it's hard to really tell. I guess it is important to kind of get back to the data and operate based off the data and not what social media is kind of pushing up there.
Right.
Is there anything else? We're just about out of time. Do you have anything that you want to touch on that we haven't, that you think is important for people to know about?
I think those are the three or four most important issues. Obviously, anytime anyone wants to have a conversation about anything that's going on, I am open. My phone is open. My email is open. You make an appointment with me to talk about any issues. I want to make sure that we are being ultra transparent at all times. I do an e-newsletter every single month to get information out to our residents, because the most important thing is to make sure our residents have factual and accurate information about what's going on in our city. I love sharing information about what's going on in our city. I speak to groups. I just started mornings with Mayor Martin in order to get to have like coffee socials with individuals who may have questions, who want to come out on. I usually do them on the last week of the month, either on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And I also want to support small business. So I'm doing them at the local coffee shops in order to get people out and to have those intimate conversations about what's going on in our city. Some people don't like to come to council meetings, or they don't like to talk in big groups, but that one-on-one time I think is really beneficial for people. And it's important for me to have those conversations as their mayor. So I'm going to continue on that path as well. But
Cool.
Transparency and open government.
I can see how that's. Yeah, I can see how that's probably an easier, more intimate setting than a more traditional place where you're kind of packed with people and you're in like the city council or.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, where can people is it just through the city of PSL? Is that where they can learn more about your newsletter? And
sure. If anyone wants to email me at mayor@cityofpsl.com, my staff will subscribe you to the newsletter. Also, I'll be putting the information on my coffees events on my mayor Facebook page. And so they can look for that every month on that page as well. And also always through the city website. If you want to call the office and speak to me about anything, it's 871-5159. And if you want to have a conversation on the phone or set up an appointment to talk about anything and everything Port St. Lucie, more than happy to do that. And I want to thank you also for having me on today.
That's awesome.
Appreciate it. Because I love any opportunity I can to talk.
Oh, it was a complete pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And look, anytime we have an opportunity to have someone like you on and get some good, reliable information out to people, especially people who read us and follow us and who are members of some of our Facebook groups. We have the largest Facebook group in Port St. Lucie, and I want to make sure that the information getting out to them and anybody else who's on our website is going to be reliable and useful. Sometimes it's hard and it gets lost in the noise. And so I really appreciate you being on.
Absolutely. And if you ever want, if your followers or fans ever want to come up with a list of questions that they are really important and you want to have me on and ask about those, I'd be happy to do that too. I really want to make sure that I'm always answering the residents and making sure everyone has good info. It's really important. So thank you.
That could be interesting as well.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I appreciate it. Mayor Shannon Martin, I appreciate you being on, and hopefully we talk soon.
All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Current by TreasureCoast.com. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Follow us on social media or visit TreasureCoast.com for local events, tips, and news. Have a guest or topic you'd love to hear on the show? Let us know at TreasureCoast.com. Until next time, keep riding the current and enjoying everything the Treasure Coast has to offer. See you soon.